Hi everybody, and welcome back to my kitchen. In today's video, we're going to be making Conifer shortbread cookies. So I hope this video is finding everybody well, or as well as you can be under the circumstances. Despite our holidays not really looking like they do every year, I'm still continuing with the traditions that really bring our family joy. And one of the things that we really love is making conifer or spruce tip shortbread cookies. Now, unfortunately, this year I didn't get around to making my spruce tip sugar. I just missed that season. I don't know, it didn't seem to be on my radar. If you have spruce tip sugar, you can absolutely substitute that. And if you don't already have a copy of my book, the recipe for spruce tip shortbread is in here. It's definitely worth looking at because there's also a few other wild food recipes in there too. But if you're like me this year and you don't have access to spruce tip sugar because you forgot to harvest your spruce tips, you can just substitute your recipe with conifer needles. So conifers are our evergreen needles. This right here would be a blue spruce from my neighbors. These are white pine. So you definitely want to do your homework and ensure that the needles you're harvesting are from an edible variety of conifer tree that hasn't been sprayed. So I definitely encourage you to avoid using your Christmas tree. Most Christmas tree farms do spray, so unless you know for certain it hasn't been sprayed, you'll just have to find your conifer needles elsewhere. Now, if you have a favorite shortbread recipe that you've been making for years, it's really easy to just adjust your favorite recipe. All you have to do is add about 1/4 to 1/2 cup, depending on how much you want this to taste like conifer needles, 1/4 to 1/2 cup of chopped needles to your favorite shortbread recipe. But I will be sharing my shortbread recipe with you today. So the first step is removing the needles from your conifer branches. This does take a bit of time, but it's well worth it. And now I will show you what I'm going to do with these needles and my food processor in the next clip. The process of pulling off the conifer needles is almost meditative in nature. You want to work slowly so that way you don't start pulling off large chunks of bark. That wouldn't be too tasty in cookies, I imagine. So you're going to notice here that we clearly dealt with a lot of technical difficulties in the filming of this video, and my mic wasn't being picked up. Unfortunately, we didn't notice it until it was too late and the cookies were already baked. So I'm going to do my best to make this look like something more seamless and not like a badly dubbed movie. So I mentioned in this clip that the blog post that I have that accompanies this is in the description. So you're welcome to check that out. And that blog post will have both variations of the cookie recipe, including using conifer needles like we're doing in the video, or using your spruce tip sugar. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking my 1/3 of a cup of needles, which is what I decided to use. You can use anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 cup of needles. And I'm using my food processor to combine my 1/2 cup of organic cane sugar and my conifer needles. And this process did take quite a while. It took almost a full minute in order for the needles to chop finely enough so you weren't chewing on big chunks of needles in your cookies. So if you don't have a food processor, look how beautiful that turned out. My goodness. And the smell, I often wish in these videos that we had smell-o-vision somehow. So like I said, it took about a full minute. If you don't have a food processor, that's completely fine. What you'll want to do is chop your needles really fine using a mezzaluna or your favorite kitchen knife, and then just blend it with your sugar. That process will work just fine as well. So the next step is adding your conifer needle sugar to your butter. You're going to need 1 cup of butter. We like to use organic grass-fed butter, unsalted, but you can use whatever kind of sugar, or pardon me, any kind of butter that you would like. I'm using my stand mixer for this video. Not necessary. If you don't have one, you can absolutely do this by hand. So we've combined the 1/2 cup of cane sugar that has been blended with the 1/3 of a cup of conifer needles to the 1 cup of butter. And what you want to do is, using the paddle on your stand mixer or using some good old-fashioned elbow grease, you're going to want to cream together your butter and your sugar. And it's imperative that your butter is at room temperature. And see, just like that. You may have to stop to scrape down the sides a few times, but it really doesn't take too long for that mixture to blend quite nicely. And again, please remember that you can use your family's favorite shortbread recipe, and all you have to do is add the conifer needles. So this is what it looks like when everything's been creamed together well. Now, my shortbread recipe is very, very simple. It's sugar, butter, and flour. Lots of recipes call for cornstarch. I personally don't like the texture, but like I said, work with what you have and work with what works for you. The next step is slowly incorporating your flour. So this process will seem a little bit more cumbersome if you're having to do it by hand, because you're going to want to add 2 tablespoons of flour in at a time. You're going to need 2 cups of flour of your choice. We like to use freshly milled organic spelt flour. I don't even sift it. So whole wheat flour will work wonderfully, and so will white flour. But keep in mind, when I wrote this recipe, that I did use a whole grain flour, so you may have to tinker with the amounts a bit. So what I'm doing here is just adding my 2 tablespoons of flour in at a time and slowly allowing the flour to incorporate with the creamed butter and sugar. And you may want to stop your mixer every now and again just to scrape down the sides to ensure that everything incorporates well. So depending on the kind of flour that you use, your dough should look roughly like this. If you're using white flour, it'll be a little bit lighter in color. If you've never worked with shortbread before, just something to keep in mind, that when you mold it in your hands, it shouldn't stick to your hands. If it does, you need to add a little bit more flour. Because I work with spelt flour, freshly milled spelt flour, it actually behaves very differently than store-bought flour. So I've learned that most measurements in baking kind of fall under the ish category. So I added 2-ish cups of flour. I like to use my little cookie scoop to roll them out into balls. I'm almost done this tray here. And then you're going to bake them in a preheated oven set to 310 degrees for about 14 minutes. And then I just like to use a cup. I dust it with a little bit of flour so the dough doesn't stick, and then I gently flatten them out. Now like I said, if you've got your own way of making shortbread and a recipe that is a family tradition, all you need to do is add a few conifer needles to it. So if you like to cut out shapes or use cookie cutters, you can do that as well. So I'm going to get to baking these, and I'll show you what they look like when they come out of the oven. Do you have any Cookie Monsters in your house? What do you think? How'd they turn out? Oh, delicious. I think they're beautiful too. And if you do happen to have... And hot. Yeah, if you do happen to have any family coming over this year, you can present it with some of your needles. I do think it looks quite nice. So thank you so very much for joining me on another Herbal YouTube video. I really appreciate it. If you haven't checked out my other videos in this series, preparing for the Yuletide season, I suggest you do so. I'll put the links to them below. We made herbal cordials, decorations, and even some mullein torches. So there's still time to do quite a few of those things. And until next time, this is Correne from Spirea Herbs, wishing you health, wellness, and a blessed winter season.